Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Dragon Prince Yuan Season 2 episode number 10 based on novel. So let's start. In the mountain forest. Magma flowed along the long spear in Xiao Qianshuan's hand as he pointed it at Zhu Yuan, while Genesis Qi churned in the sky above, forming a giant fiery red cloud. Berserk and searing undulations spread from within it. Xiao Qianxian had yet to attack, but the pressure from him had already exceeded the bald man from earlier. As expected of Saint Remains City's junior city lord. Numerous figures whispered inside the mountain forest. There was no need to question Xiao Qianshuan's strength. He was an elite even amongst the many prided geniuses. The current him had already reached the peak of the Advanced Heaven Gate stage, and was much stronger than ordinary Advanced Heaven Gate experts. I'm afraid that Zhu Yuan will not be able to flaunt his power like before. It was true. When you compared the two, Xiao Qianxian was clearly superior. He was at the peak of the Advanced Heaven Gate stage, wielded a high-grade black Genesis weapon, and had numerous tricks up his sleeves. No matter how one looked at it, Xiao Qianshuan's chances at victory were higher. Humph, let's see who will save you this time. Iciness flowed in Ji Yuling's eyes. She had originally believed that it would be easy to deal with Zhu Yuan, but the latter just seemed to become more and more of a problem. In the end, even Xiao Qianxian had been forced to personally take action. However, it was over now. Ji Yuling looked towards the remaining few Saint Remains squad members and coldly said, "Block off all of his escape paths. He will not be allowed to flee this time." The remaining few members had already completely cast their lot in with Xiao Qianxian. Hence, all of them nodded after hearing Ji Yuling's words before dispersing in all directions, sealing every path of escape available to Zhu Yuan. On the mountain top, Zhu Yuan merely calmly watched them do so, not seeming to care at all. His gaze soon locked onto Xiao Qianxian. The strength displayed by the latter was indeed far beyond regular Heaven Gate experts. The fire of battle intent slowly rose in Zhu Yuan's eyes. Before his cultivation breakthrough, his chances of victory against an opponent at Xiao Qianshuan's level were naturally slim, but now, it was going to be very different. Martial form. The heavenly Yuan brush in Zhu Yuan's hand began to grow, the snow-white hairs of the brush tip tightly clenching together into the sharp tip of a spear that flickered with a chilling light. Dark gold Genesis Qi also began to swirl around Zhu Yuan like a storm, turning all the rocks in the vicinity to dust. Xiao Qianshuan's tightly gripped his spear as he coldly said, "I will let you know that your 400 feet tall Genesis Qi is not enough to permit such arrogance before me." The instant he finished speaking, Xiao Qianshuan's figure abruptly shot forward, his figure blinking from place to place before arriving in front of Zhu Yuan. The former's spear shook, transforming into countless flashes of scarlet red light that seemed to cover the sky as they engulfed Zhu Yuan, targeting his vitals. Formidable, deadly, ruthless. However, Zhu Yuan merely let out a prolonged laugh in response, no fear whatsoever, as the heavenly Yuan brush thrusted forward to meet the attack head-on. A dark gold radiance curled around the brush tip like 1,000 stars. Spear and brush clashed, sparks flying with loud clangs. Genesis Qi rippled violently every time they met, shaking the surrounding air. In a short span of a dozen breaths, the two had already exchanged dozens of blows. Every strike ruthless, without the slightest shred of mercy. Spear and brush collided, only to be pushed back once again. Zhu Yuan's arm suddenly jerked as the brush tip transformed into a stream of white that swiftly shot forward, stabbing towards Xiao Qianshuan's throat at a tricky angle. However, just as the attack was about to land, a spear pierced towards it, slightly changing the trajectory of the white hairs. Zhu Yuan's expression was icy. With a thought, the snow-white hairs suddenly scattered, transforming into countless strings that seemed to cover the sky as they descended, aimed at every inch of Xiao Qianshuan's body. What a bizarre Genesis weapon. Xiao Qianshuan's pupils tightened slightly. Zhu Yuan's black brush Genesis weapon was extremely strange. Its white hairs could take in numerous forms at any moment, making it very challenging to counter. However, Xiao Qianxian was no weakling. With a jerk of the flame devil spear in his hand, scarlet red magma began to rise from it, forming a shield of boiling magma in front of him. Countless snow-white hairs stabbed at the magma, but all were repelled in the end. Zhu Yuan's and Xiao Qianshuan's figures were simultaneously blown backwards. Xiao Qianshuan's expression was grave, the flame devil spear drawing a long scar on the ground. Opposite him, Zhu Yuan drifted backwards, while the snow-white hairs rapidly gathered back to the tip of the brush, pointing towards the ground at an angle. The attacks of both parties had been vicious in their previous clash. However, every attack had ultimately been blocked. The pupils of everyone watching the fight shrank slightly at this moment, evidently surprised that Zhu Yuan did not seem to be at a disadvantage even against a peak advance Heaven Gate expert like Xiao Qianxian. I've truly underestimated you. To be capable of so much at the initial Heaven Gate stage is remarkable. Xiao Qianxuan's eyes lowered slightly, his tone indifferent as he continued, if given some time, I'm afraid that even Wu Huang will not hold much superiority against you. Your talent is truly terrifying. In fact, I've begun to believe it now. Zhu Yuan's eyebrows raised slightly. Believe what? Xiao Qianxian calmly answered, believe that you really are the so-called sacred dragon of the Zhu clan, and that Wu Huang had merely stolen your blessing, allowing him to reach where he is today. Zhu Yuan smiled but did not comment. However, Xiao Qianxian paused, an extremely dangerous look emerging in his eyes as he stared at Zhu Yuan. That is also why I've decided that it will be best to kill you here. Zhu Yuan chuckled. I'm afraid that you're not that capable. Xiao Qianxian flatly responded, I know that you obtained that little Heaven Genesis technique, but I also know that you have not learnt it. Zhu Yuan's eyes narrowed slightly. The requirements to learn a little Heaven Genesis technique are exceedingly stringent, plus your focus has been on breaking through into the Heaven Gate stage while hiding here for the past few days, and you naturally did not have the time nor conditions. Therefore, you cannot possibly have learnt it. Xiao Qianxuan's calm explanation was filled with certainty. Zhu Yuan slowly replied, you are pretty smart. It was indeed as Xiao Qianxian had guessed. Although Zhu Yuan knew how to practice the little Heaven Genesis technique, Great Wind and Thunder, he had yet to learn it. Xiao Qianxian laughed, his hand slowly tightening around the long scarlet-red spear as a toying look surfaced in his eyes. It's just such a pity, you don't have a little Heaven Genesis technique, but... The Genesis chi around him began to churn violently at this moment, akin to a scarlet-red storm as it swept outwards, while astonishing ripples pulsed from his body. The ground below his feet began to tremble. But I have won. Shocked gaze after gaze watched as scarlet-red Genesis chi shot out from the top of Xiao Qianxuan's head, culminating into a giant halo. An almighty and frightening pressure pulsed. As Zhu Yuan gazed at the scarlet halo, his eyes narrowed. A titanic scarlet-red halo floated above Xiao Qianxian, emitting scorching and berserk undulations that dried up and cracked that ground below. Every gaze in the mountain forest was tinged with fear and astonishment as they watched this scene. That's a little Heaven Genesis technique. Xiao Qianxian is the junior city lord of Saint Romain's city. It is not strange for him to have mastered one. Xiao Qianxian has so many trump cards. It's going to become dangerous for Zhu Yuan. Given Xiao Qianxuan's strength, even those super elite geniuses will have to face such power with seriousness. It's a little Heaven Genesis technique after all, its power is enough to be a game changer. Numerous whispers rang out. There was now a trace of pity in the gazes that looked towards Zhu Yuan. The latter had displayed his extremely solid foundations when he advanced to the Heaven Gate stage, but it was ultimately still only the initial Heaven Gate stage. Someone sighed, Zhu Yuan is still young and has yet to realize his full potential. If he had patiently bided his time instead and mastered the little Heaven Genesis technique, Xiao Qianxian will not be able to do anything against him. Ji Yuling's pretty face radiated with happiness when she was this. Her gaze turned towards Zhu Yuan, a mocking look emerging as she said, the consequences of angering Xiao Qianxian is not something the likes of you can withstand. Under those numerous pitying gazes, Zhu Yuan's expression turned rather grave as he stared at the giant scarlet-red halo above Xiao Qianxian. The undulations that pulsed from it were extremely destructive. Such power had indeed far surpassed the high-grade black tier level. Can't believe that he has mastered a little Heaven Genesis technique, muttered Zhu Yuan under his breath. Xiao Qianxian was indeed a formidable foe. If it was before his breakthrough, he would likely have no choice but to avoid. Unfortunately for Xiao Qianxian, dark gold Genesis chi began to surge out of Zhu Yuan's body, swirling and expanding around him like a howling dark gold hurricane. Astonishing undulations pulsed outwards, shaking the mountain below his feet. Gasp after gasp rang out when the onlookers saw this scene. Zhu Yuan is really remarkable. He's only at the initial Heaven Gate stage, but his Genesis chi levels does not lose to an advanced Heaven Gate stage practitioner. Moreover, from how concentrated his Genesis Chi looks, it's definitely not low grade. No wonder he dares to pit himself against Xiao Qianxian. But even so, I'm afraid that he is still not Xiao Qianxuan's match. The scarlet-red halo above Xiao Qianxian faintly trembled, a sign that its power was about to approach its peak. His cold eyes gazed at Zhu Yuan as he said, "Why do you still try such meaningless actions? Wouldn't it be better to obediently wait for death?" His finger slowly extended, pointing towards Zhu Yuan as an emotionless voice echoed from his mouth. Little Heaven Genesis Technique, Scarlet Devil Wheel. The giant scarlet-red halo shook violently for a moment, before suddenly disappearing from sight a split second later. It was too fast to be seen by the naked eye. The only things everyone was able to observe was space distort and a flash of scarlet. As scarlet swept past, the ground below dried up and crumbled. In the face of such a devastating attack, even those with the strength of the Heaven Gate stage would feel their scalps turn numb. Was this the power of a Little Heaven Genesis technique? If they were the ones in Zhu Yuan's place, they would not even have any chance of dodging and be killed in an instant. Scarlet light lit up the horizon, rapidly enlarging in Zhu Yuan's eyes. Even the surrounding air seemed to burn, producing a burnt smell. A breath was slowly dispelled from Zhu Yuan's mouth. His hands came together as a low voice seemed to quietly escape his lips. Omni-Python Chi, Python swallows the heavens. The instant Zhu Yuan's voice was heard, the dark gold Genesis Chi storm around him suddenly expanded once again. One could only watch as a dark gold giant python emerged from the storm. Python swallows the heavens technique. Back then, Zhu Yuan had used this move to kill Wang Chaotian. Although he had only been able to use it with the aid of Silver Shadow, after stepping into the Heaven Gate stage, he was now able to activate it with his own power. However, the giant dark gold python appeared rather illusory, evidence that its power was pretty lacking compared to the previous time it was used. Though this was so, Xiao Qianxian was also unable to match an Alpha Origin expert like Wang Chaotian. The giant Genesis Chi python hissed, opening its enormous mouth to swallow the incoming scarlet wheel. Boom boom. Sounds of explosions rang out from the dark gold giant python's body, but did not continue for long. Meanwhile, the python's titanic body shrank with each explosion. The Little Heaven Genesis technique that Xiao Qianxian had put all his power into had been easily neutralized in this manner. How is this possible? Countless cries of surprise rang out at practically the same time, after nearly popping from their sockets. How could they have imagined such an outcome? To think that Xiao Qianxuan's terrifyingly powerful Little Heaven Genesis technique had disappeared like this without causing even a tiny ripple. How had Zhu Yuan done it? The expression on Xiao Qianxuan's face turned rigid little by little. Some distance behind him, Ji Yuling looked as if she had just saw a ghost, her mouth so wide an egg could be easily popped in. It seems that your Little Heaven Genesis technique has yet to be properly mastered, its power seems to be a little weak. Zhu Yuan chuckled when he saw Xiao Qianxuan's stiff expression. His Python swallows the heavens technique was the strongest technique in his current arsenal. In addition, because it originated from the Omni-Python Chi, the power from the combination of the two was even more devastating. In fact, even the Alpha Origin expert, Wang Chaotian, had been directly swallowed whole by it. What kind of Genesis technique is this? Xiao Qianxuan's complexion was ashen. Zhu Yuan ignored the question. With a flick, the now much smaller dark gold python abruptly darted forward, heading straight for Xiao Qianxian. The python was extremely quick, appearing in front of Xiao Qianxian in a flash. Fear finally flitted across Xiao Qianxuan's eyes. He gritted his teeth as rapidly retreated, while another jade pendant appeared in his hand and was quickly snapped. A circular shield of light appeared in front of him. It was obviously another defensive Genesis treasure. Boom. The dark gold python slammed into the shield, causing it to ripple violently. Xiao Qianxian continued to hurriedly flee backwards as cracks began to appear on the shield. His gaze flickered in calculation. In the end, a grudging look flitted across his eyes as his figure retreated back to Ji Yuling's side, grabbing her wrist as he shouted, "Go." A scroll appeared in his hand and was quickly torn. Rays of light instantly exploded from it, swallowing the both of them. Crack! However, the shield also broke at this moment. There was no time for the python to bite them, but two small balls of blood-red chi shot out from its mouth, burying themselves in Xiao Qianxuan's and Ji Yuling's bodies. The light below their feet grew brighter and brighter, evidently some kind of Genesis rune used for escaping. You should leave behind something before you leave, right? Zhu Yuan frowned. Xiao Qianshuan's really had plenty of life-preserving methods. However, did he think that Zhu Yuan would so easily let the latter escape as he pleased? With a cold chuckle, Zhu Yuan sent out a thought and a suction force emerged from the python's mouth. Xiao Qianxian could only watch in surprise as the universe bag at his waist flew out and was swallowed by the python. However, the Genesis rune below his feet completed its activation at this moment. Light enveloped the two figures as they disappeared with a swish. Although Xiao Qianxian had disappeared, his exasperated howl echoed. Zhu Yuan, I will not let you off. The battle between both parties ended unexpectedly quick. Before any of the onlookers could react, Xiao Qianxian and Ji Yuling had already disappeared, leaving only an exasperated cry in the mountains. The crowd gradually returned to their senses, involuntarily swallowing their saliva when they gazed upon the mess of a battlefield once again. No one had expected that the junior city lord of Saint Romain's city would actually flee. He had the strength of the peak advance Heaven Gate stage, and only a handful of people amongst the Kangman continent's younger generation surpassed him. Yet, he had been beaten by Zhu Yuan, a recently ascended initial Heaven Gate practitioner. Moreover, Xiao Qianxian had lost even after bringing out his little Heaven Genesis technique. Gaze after gaze seemed to gradually change when they looked towards Zhu Yuan again. There was now a little less scrutiny and a little more respect. Silence blanketed the mountains. Everyone knew that Zhu Yuan's name would resound in the Saint Romain's domain after today's battle. Zhu Yuan paid no attention to their gazes. He merely made a beckoning motion with his hand and the dark gold Genesis Chi returned, bringing with it a universe bag. Zhu Yuan caught the bag, gently swinging it from side to side. He's really good at running. Zhu Yuan shook his head. He had still underestimated the tricks Xiao Qianxian had up his sleeve. The latter was practically overflowing with treasures to preserve one's life and escape. Well, you won't be feeling too good either even if you escaped. Zhu Yuan softly chuckled. At the final moment, he had sent 2 bundles of dragon's resentment poison into Xiao Qianshuan's and Ji Yuling's bodies. The poison will teach them what it's like to beg for death. Zhu Yuan had personally experienced it for over a dozen years after all. Time to see what else Mr. Junior City Lord has. Dark gold Genesis Chi surged towards the universe bag in Zhu Yuan's hand. A faint Genesis rune appeared at the mouth of the bag, blocking the foreign power. However, the resistance was not much of an obstruction to Zhu Yuan. After sending out a dozen waves of Genesis Chi, the Genesis rune gradually dimmed, eventually shattering. With a thought, Zhu Yuan's senses swept into the bag and took a good look at its contents. The first items to appear was 8 gold crystal cards. These were Genesis crystal cards of the Heavenly Crystal Pavilion, and each gold one could be exchanged for 1 million Genesis crystals. 8 gold Genesis crystal cards represented 8 million Genesis crystals. What a wealthy little lord. The sight of these 8 gold crystal cards made the corners of Zhu Yuan's mouth twitch a little. Zhu Qing had only passed him 500,000 Genesis crystals when the former left the Great Zhu Empire. In comparison, there were 8 million Genesis crystals in Xiao Qianshuan's universe bag. An absolutely enormous sum of money. But 8 million should be his entire fortune. Zhu Yuan grinned. The loss of 8 million would definitely be akin to cutting one's flesh even for someone like Xiao Qianxian. I should return Lulu or her money when I meet her again. Zhu Yuan continued to inspect the contents of the universe bag. There were many useful and valuable things inside, including several rare Genesis resources. This spoke volumes about Xiao Qianshuan's wealth. A lightning rod stone. A deep black stone suddenly appeared in Zhu Yuan's hand. The mottled stone was full of holes and seemed to faintly give off a gleam akin to lightning. Pleasant surprise flashed in his eyes when he saw it. To learn the little Heaven Genesis technique, Great Wind and Thunder, Zhu Yuan needed to draw wind and lightning into his body during a thunderstorm to create a certain mark. Only then would the completed Great Wind and Thunder technique possess the power of wind and lightning, granting it destructive power. The lightning rod stone could help Zhu Yuan smoothen the process of drawing lightning into his body, increasing the speed of mastering the technique. What a pleasant surprise. After going through the entire bag, Zhu Yuan felt rather regretful that there was no Scarlet Devil will Little Heaven Genesis technique inside. But it made sense. A Little Heaven Genesis technique was a valuable treasure even to a powerful faction like Saint Romain's city. Xiao Qianxian could not possibly be allowed to easily take it with him. Even so, the haul this time was pretty good. Now that Zhu Yuan was done with the bag, his gaze turned towards the figures that were still in the vicinity as he said, "The battle is already over, what are all of you still doing here? Waiting to claim my bounty." He was naturally not going to be nice to those who had come for his bounty. Upon hearing his words, the figures on the mountain laughed awkwardly. If it was before, they would have likely cursed and scolded. However, the current Zhu Yuan had beaten off even someone like Xiao Tianxian. Such frightening battle power was something they naturally did not dare to offend. Hence, the figures of the mountain retreated in a slightly dejected manner. Zhu Yuan paid them no attention. He also prepared to leave the area and find an appropriate place to learn the great wind and thunder technique. At this moment, however, he suddenly sensed something and lifted his head, gazing towards the untouchable saint tablet high up in the sky. The table was currently shaking. Practically every prided genius in the entire Saint Remains felt this disturbance. Heads were immediately raised, looks of astonishment soon arising on their faces. Light began to converge in the tablet, and for the first time, ancient words slowly appeared. It was a name. The first name that had appeared on the Saint tablet, the name was Zhu Xiaoyao. Zhu Xiaoyao battled Wu Huang. Wu Huang retreated. They were just 8 simple words, but they caused tremendous waves in the Saint Remains domain. Countless geniuses were flabbergasted as they stared at the tablet, completely shocked by the information that had appeared on it. They naturally knew who Wu Huang was. He was one of those that stood at the apex of Kangman continent's younger generation, and one of the greatest contenders for the greatest gift of the Saint Remains domain. And yet, the tablet had declared that Wu Huang had been beaten into retreat. Who was Zhu Xiaoyao? How can he possess such terrifying strength? Moreover, there were countless intense battles that had already occurred in the Saint Remains domain, and even the fight between Zhu Yuan and Xiao Tianxian had not been recorded by the Saint tablet. While only this particular battle had been acknowledged by the tablet, what did this say? This meant that battle had already reached the level where it could be acknowledged by the Saint tablet. One could imagine how intense it was. In the mountain forest, Zhu Yuan's eyes were wide open, mouth agape as he stared at the Saint tablet. A long while later, he violently sucked in a breath of cool air. Others may not know who Zhu Xiaoyao was, but how could he not? It was Yao Yao. Yao Yao had actually encountered Wu Huang, and even exchanged blows with him. From the looks of it, Yao Yao seemed to have forced Wu Huang into withdrawing, meaning she had taken the advantage in their fight. Zhu Yuan awkwardly scratched the back of his head, as he recalled the words Yao Yao had said to him before entering the Saint Remains domain. If she met Wu Huang, she would teach him a lesson. Who could have imagined that she would really make those words a reality? A warm feeling flowed in Zhu Yuan's heart. Yao Yao had such a nonchalant and uncaring character. The reason she purposely went to cause trouble for Wu Huang was very likely because of him. Even Yao Yao has left her name on the tablet. Looks like I'll have to work harder. From the looks of it, one will have to achieve a battle accomplishment on the level of the Alpha Origin in order to leave one's name on the tablet. Numerous ideas swirled in Zhu Yuan's head. In the end, he ceased hesitating, his toes pushing off the ground as dark gold Genesis chi surged out from beneath his feet, forming a dark gold cloud that brought him into the sky. I should first master the great wind and thunder technique, before meeting up with Yao Yao and the rest. A certain area in the Saint Remains domain. Wu Huang was seated on a mountain peak, his head raised to view the Saint tablet in the sky. The expression on his face did not fluctuate much as he stared at the 8 words on the tablet. Moments later, he mumbled to himself, Zhu Xiaoyao. Why have I not heard of this person before, and what relation does he have with Zhu Yuan? Wu Huang frowned slightly. It was just as described on the Saint tablet. He had fought with Zhu Xiaoyao, and the outcome was him being in a disadvantageous position, leaving him no option but to withdraw. The battle was extremely intense, pretty much the hardest battle Wu Huang had experienced in the past few years. The opponent clearly had no Genesis Chi, but his spirit was exceptionally strong. In addition, his mastery over Genesis runes was nothing short of amazing, each Genesis rune easily flowing from his hands like water, overwhelming and unfathomable. Although Wu Huang knew the strategy to beat such a person was to close in, none of his numerous attempts had succeeded in breaching the distance of 10 feet around Zhu Xiaoyao. Even Wu Huang found the endless stream of Genesis rune scrolls incomparably difficult to deal with. Moreover, Wu Huang could faintly sense a dangerous sensation from Yao Yao. It was this very sensation that made him ultimately chose to retreat instead of battling to the death. His spirit is extremely powerful, and is likely also holding back something. Wu Huang slowly muttered, his expression turning much graver for the first time. He had a feeling that Yao Yao would likely be his biggest obstacle this time. It will be a huge problem if I don't find a way to eliminate him, mumbled Wu Huang to himself. His eyes suddenly narrowed slightly as he icily said, "Since you're already here, show yourself. Sneaking around and hiding, what difference is there between you and a rat?" The surroundings remained silent. A cold light flashed in Wu Huang's eyes. His 5 fingers suddenly clenched into a fist as he fiercely punched in a certain direction. Boom! Scarlet-red Genesis Chi whizzed forth, melting even the ground below his feet. The Genesis Chi shot towards a certain spot. However, just as it was about to hit, the space there suddenly rippled as a pale hand slowly reached out. The hand gently twirled, stopping the domineering scarlet-red Genesis Chi when it was right in front of the palm. Night black Genesis Chi gushed out from the pale hand, clashing against the scarlet-red Genesis Chi. In the end, the latter was completely corroded away with a final fizzle. Why the need to be so hostile against a guest from far away? A raspy voice suddenly rang out. Space rippled again as a figure in black robes slowly appeared. The young man in black had a set of pitch-black pupils that looked akin to vortexes, a sight that made one shiver. Who are you? I don't recall someone like you amongst those from the Kangman continent. Wu Huang frowned as he stared at the black pupil youth. The aura from the latter's body made him feel the need to be a little wary. This youth was clearly no ordinary individual. The youth in black robes seemed to grin. Dongxian continent, Yi clan, Yi Ming. Wu Huang's pupils shrank slightly as he said in a cold voice, "Someone from the Dongxian continent. This Saint Remains domain belongs to our Kangman continent. You people from the Dongxian continent dare to sneak in. Looks like you are up to nothing good, and probably intend to snatch away the greatest blessing." The youth in black robes shook his head. Blessings are granted by the will of the heavens, and is not exclusive in nature. Only the strong are worthy of it. If I manage to take it, it would only mean that I am more qualified than the prided geniuses of the Kangman continent. Wu Huang faintly said, "Then let me test if you do have the qualifications." Scarlet-red Genesis Chi began to rise from his body, forming a great scarlet-red sun behind him as the rock below him began to melt. The Genesis Chi Wu Huang cultivated was a little similar to Xiao Qianshuan's, only more domineering. The youth in black waved his hand. "I am not here to fight you, but propose a certain cooperation." Cooperation? Wu Huang's eyes narrowed. The youth called Yi Ming answered in a raspy voice, "I saw the battle between you and Zhu Xiaoyao." Wu Huang's heart shivered a little. He had not realized there was someone hiding nearby. It seems that Yi Ming had some very strange abilities. "You didn't know I was there, right?" He, but Zhu Xiaoyao knew. The reason why he did not use his full power was because he was guarding against me. The vortexes in Yi Ming's black pupils rotated. "It is true that I never expected someone like that to appear in your Kangman continent." Yi Ming showed a thin smile. Wu Huang was expressionless. "I heard that Zhu Xiaoyao has a pretty good relationship with your mortal enemy Zhu Yuan. That's why he will ultimately pit himself against you." Yi Ming slowly continued, "He's a great threat, but if we cooperate, we will surely be able to eliminate him. I feel that such a cooperation will be very important to you." The expression in Wu Huang's eyes became deep and unreadable. He was indeed a little enticed by this deal. Zhu Xiaoyao was too mysterious and will definitely become a huge problem, and even bigger theirs than Li Chun and the rest. As for whether working together with those from the Dongxian continent would invoke the ire of the other prided geniuses of the Kangman continent, Wu Huang did not need to take it into consideration. There was nothing he would not stoop to in order to walk the path of the strong. Wu Huang said in a low voice, "Although Zhu Xiaoyao has no Genesis Chi, he is a complete mystery. Even if we do manage to defeat him, we may not be able to eliminate him. The two of us may not be able to, but what if we add another 4? Yi Ming smiled faintly. The moment these words were said, Wu Huang sensed Genesis Chi undulations erupt from the surroundings. Next, 4 figures rose into the sky and landed around him. These 4 figures were extremely young, but the powerful Genesis Chi ripples spread from their bodies made Wu Huang's pupils shrink a little. The 4 of them were likely not weaker than Blind Sword. It seems that the Dongxian continent had come prepared, their goal, the greatest blessing. There was no change in Wu Huang's expression. Even though he was currently surrounded by 5 people, he did not display any fear. If he wanted to leave, there would naturally be a way. Wu Huang slowly said, "If it's now, I believe it should be enough." Such a lineup could only be described as terrifying. No matter how mysterious Zhu Xiaoyao was, once he was trapped in their net, escape would practically be impossible. Yi Ming softly chuckled. "Since that it's so, our alliance is temporarily established. However, there is something else that we'll need your help with after." Wu Huang calmly asked, "What is it?" "These teammates of mine are rather interested in the super elite geniuses of your Kangman continent, and plan to use them to leave their names on the tablet." Wu Huang indifferently responded, "I can lead the way, but they are no kind Buddhas either. It is not certain who will end up trampling who in the end. Of course, the best outcome would be for both parties to end up injured. There is no need for you to worry about such matters." Yi Ming shook his head. Soon after, he looked towards Wu Huang and smiled. "Are you not worried that our Dongxian continent will take all the top places, making the prided geniuses of your Kangman continent lose all their face?" Wu Huang thought about it for a moment. "What does that got to do with me?" Yi Ming was stunned, but soon began to laugh. "I hope we'll have a happy alliance." 7 days had already passed since the battle between Zhu Yuan and Xiao Tianxian. During these 7 days, the Saint Remains domain gradually began boiling with activity. More and more opportunities were appearing in the form of various mystical areas where anyone who could successfully enter would obtain some pretty good blessings or gifts. Over the past few days, news had already spread of several lucky individuals obtaining various blessings, allowing them to be completely reborn, their originally mediocre strength leaping into the sky, transforming them into elites even amongst the many prided geniuses. This caused the eyes of countless geniuses to burn with excitement and anticipation. For a time, searching for these mystical places became the most sought-after dream of everyone here. Of course, this naturally led to numerous intense battles from which some geniuses were able to distinguish themselves, making their names resound loudly across the Saint Remains domain. Included amongst them was Zhu Yuan, who had defeated Xiao Tianxian. However, when compared to Yao Yao, all of them appeared insignificant. Till today, only her name alone could be seen on the Saint tablet. It was clear as day that achieving the so-called distinguished battle accomplishment was not easy at all. As such, everyone put their energy and time into training, killing many Genesis beasts, to raise their strength as fast as possible. Only then would they raise their chances of being acknowledged by the tablet. Zhu Yuan was of the same mind. While hunting Genesis beasts to raise his strength, he kept a lookout for any stormy areas, because only in a thunderstorm would he be able to initiate himself into the Little Heaven Genesis technique, Great Wind and Thunder. His search eventually led him to an appropriate location. Rumble. It was a barren land where mountains gathered together in groups, their tall peaks piercing the clouds. No trees could be found on these mountains, their bare appearance making the place look rather desolate. Thunderclouds were present at the peaks of these mountains all year round, the endlessly rumbling thunder filling the area. Zhu Yuan currently stood on one of these majestic mountains. The top of the mountain was immersed in thunderclouds, surrounded by ominous black in which lightning madly flashed or flickered. It was a sight that would make one's heart jump and flesh tremble. However, Zhu Yuan's face was overflowing with joy. This was the best place to master the Great Wind and Thunder technique. Finally found it after so many days. Zhu Yuan sighed. He would surely master the technique here. Once he did, his battle power would rise once again. He sat down on the mountain peak, and gradually began to fall into a state of concentration. The rumbling thunder that filled the area seemed to gradually fade away into the background. A complex and profound intonation slowly flowed into his mind. It was the cultivation method of the Great Wind and Thunder technique. Feel the wind, feel the lightning, infuse your Genesis chi, converge into a mark. It was a long time later before Zhu Yuan's eyes slowly opened. He closed his hand as the lightning rod stone appeared within it. The black stone slowly rose into the air, ultimately hovering some distance above his head. Zhu Yuan began to pour Genesis chi into the stone, immediately causing a peculiar cry of thunder to faintly echo from its many holes. Rumble. The wind and lightning in the vicinity began to move as if being beckoned by something. With a loud boom, a foot-long lightning bolt struck the lightning rod stone. The stone trembled as it absorbed the lightning. After which, lightning began spouting out of its many holes, bombarding Zhu Yuan's body. Zhu Yuan's body immediately began to shake, the flesh all over his body squirming as intense pain pulsed from the surface of his body. Zhu Yuan grimaced in pain, but resolutely gritted his teeth as he endured. Only by experiencing wind and lightning attacks would the body gradually grow accustomed to them, allowing one to gain a better understanding of their nature and properties, and eventually create a wind-thunder mark on one's body. A little heaven genesis technique was profoundly powerful, an existence far beyond the realm of black tier techniques. Hence why the method to learn one was even stranger and difficult. It is fortunate that I have this lightning rod stone that can continuously absorb wind and lightning. Or the process would be much slower, muttered Zhu Yuan to himself. Rumble. Thunder boomed endlessly on the mountain top. Within the glaring lightning, one would faintly see Zhu Yuan's trembling figure. A certain area in the Saint Remains domain. Deep within the forest. Yao Yao was dressed in white, leaning against the trunk of the tree, legs dangling over the branch. Her long legs appeared exceptionally slender when wrapped by her long white pants. She gently swung her legs, as she retrieved a jade cup from her universe bag, and extending it into a hole in the tree. When the cup exited, it was filled with green liquid that gave off the strong and fragrant smell of good wine. Never expected to encounter such good stuff here. Yao Yao took a little sip, her pink tongue tip slowly licking her lips. A satisfied smile was revealed on her beautiful as jade-like face. A group of apes angrily grunted below the tree, but did not dare to approach. They could only work themselves into a fluster, screeching unceasingly. I'm only going to have a little. Upon hearing the din, Yao Yao tilted her head downwards and looked at them before continuing, but if you keep disturbing me, I'll get rid of all of you. The piercing noise instantly turned to silence, the hairs all over the ape's body standing as they clumped together trembling. At this very moment, they could feel that the human before their eyes was very scary. So obedient. Yao Yao gave a faint nod of approval, raising her fair and slender neck again, as she downed an entire cup of alcohol. As she casually threw the cup away, iciness slowly gathered in her clear eyes, as she indifferently said, "It seems that the lesson I taught you previously was not enough." A figure wrapped in scarlet red light descended some distance in front of her. It was Wu Huang. He stood on the leaves that carpeted the ground, his body completely still as he stared at Yao Yao and slowly said, "What is your relationship with Zhu Yuan? If you chose not to help either of us, I will allow you to leave today." A fan appeared in Yao Yao's hand, gently tapping her palm as she cocked her head slightly, looking at Wu Huang as she replied with indifference, "I have no good feelings toward a thief." "What did you say?" Wu Huang's gaze turned frosty as an astonishing aura spread from his body. Yao Yao propped the fan below her sharp chin and lazily said, "Taking something that doesn't belong to you, what can it be called besides stealing? Looks like you're tired of living." Flames seemed to surge in Wu Huang's eyes. His ice-cold voice was filled with chilling murder. "It's only been a few days, but it seems that you've already forgotten the pain from your wounds." Spirit light began to flicker on Yaoiro's bright forehead as a powerful spirit ripple spread. He, what a powerful spirit. A raspy voice suddenly rang out within the forest. One could only watch as a figure in black slowly walked out some distance behind Yao Yao. It was Yi Ming. "The one who was spying on us last time was you, right?" Yao Yao turned her head slightly and stole a glance at Yi Ming. "I did not expect that the both of you would work together." Yi Ming sighed softly. "Amongst the younger generation, I've never seen someone whose spirit is as strong as yours. That's why, to eliminate uncertainty, I feel that you should no longer appear in the Saint Remains domain. You will become our greatest obstruction." Yao Yao stood up on the tree branch. Her thin figure seemed rather domineering at this moment as she calmly said, "The combination of you two is indeed very strong, but you may not be able to keep me here." Yi Ming chuckled as he nodded. "Then what about now?" His hands reached out and gently clapped. Boom. Four powerful Genesis chi ripples suddenly exploded from the forest, sweeping away the surrounding trees. They formed an array that trapped Yao Yao from far away. Yao Yao shot a glance at her surroundings. This time, however, her brows slowly knitted together. To think that the other party had sent out such a lineup to deal with her, a lineup that was going to be quite troublesome to deal with. This video will end here.